Before we let you go, last year, of course, the draft happened during the middle of the pandemic, at the start of the pandemic, so everything was done remotely. This year, the draft is in Cleveland. Socially distanced watch parties will happen. So it won't be the same draft we're used to, but it'll be closer to normal than what we had last year. With that in mind, how long before Roger Goodell gets booed by the fans? And secondly, who or what Cleveland Brown rival or former rival player will give what seemingly is now the annual hate speech at the draft, where he comes out and he lambasts the Cleveland Browns and their fans? Who do you see doing that this year?
Man, and listen, if I'm a Cleveland Browns guy, that's a pretty good football team. I mean, they beat the Steelers in their own turf come playoff time. Mm-hmm. And so I don't have a lot of negative about Cleveland. Now, you might have negative about what happened in the past.
Right.
But if I'm a Cleveland Brown fan, I feel more optimistic this year than I've ever felt before in my life. If you under 50 years old, because of the fact of what they've been able to build there. And so I don't know if that's going to happen, of running bad about Cleveland.
Well, Drew Pearson did it a couple years ago in Philadelphia about the Eagles.
But that was more of a personal thing with him and the Eagles, Dallas and Philly. No, listen, Eagle fans are bad. I can tell you an incident. Man, we sitting in the press box, and we kind of got heckled pregame show outside by Eagle fans. And no big deal. I mean, come on, for me, that's entertainment. That's not anything bad. So we sitting in the press box, me and Abear, and there's Eagle fans right below us. I mean, a huge section of Eagle fans. And so Bobby, got to be Bobby. So, man, he starts this EAGLES. Now, the first time he did it, man, these Eagle fans stand up and they start chanting with him. He does it again, same thing. Well, after the second time, they knew he was pulling their leg. And they both showed us that we were number one, but with a different finger. It was just, that's Eagles fans, But they were great about it. Hey, man, we're going down to the quarter and go and have a good time. The Saints had beat them pretty good and that sort of thing. So it is what it is, but it's really a dislike of Philly fans for Dallas and Dallas of Philly. That's more of a personal thing than anything else. That's what that was about with Drew Pearson. That's a personal thing between them. So I don't think you're going to see much negativity toward Cleveland or the football team, because for the first time in a long time, Hoss, they stacked. They'll go as far as Baker Mayfield can take them.
Yeah,
as far as Baker can take them, that's where they'll go. They got a really good running team. They can throw the football. They did it last year, and then Odell goes down, so they didn't have him. It'd be interesting to see what happens with OBJ. He's not getting talked about a lot. But do they enter the season with him, or do they try to deal him off defensively? They're a pretty doggone good football team. Man, they got some talent up front, and you win in the trenches, and that's where they have buoyed up all this talent. And it's so funny, it goes right back to it. This was the day after Coach O gets the job at LSU, and we talking, and I said, he said, listen, T-boy, let me tell you, Nick Saban's winning at Alabama. It's not because he got better corners than us or running backs or receivers, offensive, defensive linemen. That's where they win. They win up front. And he said, that's what we got to do here. We got to get better, offensive, defensive linemen. I think about him saying that, and when they won the national championship, and sure, you got to have a catalyst at quarterback, which they did, but they were so good up front. And last year they weren't. Their offensive line was as soft as toilet paper, and their defensive line was erratic. At times they got a pass rush, other times not. This year's a little different. Their defensive line is really good, and they got some major league depth. And I think about Cleveland, how they got back into it. I'm not sure Baker's a catalyst quarterback, but he's a good player. He's not a great one, but he's a good one. But how do they win? They win up front. Offensive, defensive lines. They fix that up, And it didn't take long. They back in the picture again. So I don't think you're going to see that. Now, as far as hatred for Roger Goodell, that you can go any city in America for that. I mean, it's much more so in Louisiana. But, Roger wants to be treated like the emperor, not like the commissioner. And I think that's, it's a kiss the ring situation. I'm run this league, which he really doesn't. But he wants that aura about him. Roger's just doing the dirty work for the 32 owners. He's their mouthpiece. And that's long been in place. It was like that when Pete Rozelle was there. It was like that, with Paul Tagliabue, and now it's with him. But I think everybody sees his personality as different. Pete got away with it because he got along with people. For the most part, Paul Tagliabue got along with people. Roger, can you name me one guy that's a really good friend of his? Now, I think he at one time was close with Tom Benson, but and then Benson passed away. He was at one time close to Robert Kraft, but that
I think he was close to George W. Bush at one point, but that's about it.
One time very close to Jerry Jones, and I think that relationship has cooled off. He whizzes everybody off. Mm-hmm. So, it's not so much the man in the position, but his personality. And I think there's some realization now of things Ian, you and I talked about many times on Saturday, was that he's not the commissioner of the NFL. He is guarder of the shield.
Right.
He is doing this because the 32 owners want him to do it, not because he wants to do it. It's what they want him to do. So when he suspended Sean Payton for the season, did he come up with that by himself?
Absolutely
Hell
not.
No, he didn't. That was the other owner saying, hey, listen, we got a multi-billion-dollar suit against us in Philadelphia. If we lose that, you know how much money we're going to lose, all of us, about this concussion and head issues? Suspend him and make it, he's the example for everybody. And bang, he gets it. And all of a sudden, what happens? They settle that suit out of court. For pennies on a dollar, they settle it. And the one thing with the NFL, they got really good lawyers. They can afford it. They got really good ones. But as far as the dislike for Goodell, I think it's obvious. And I think it all reflects on him. I think last year he was with the sweater. He tried to look like Perry Como or whatever. Back something with my mom and my grandpa and all would watch on TV.
And he sounded like he was on something.
Yeah, he looked like hey, I'm your grandpa or whatever, and I'm taking good care of the league. He's taking good care of the league financially. that he's doing, and they bulletproof through all of this. What's happened over the last couple years, they've become bulletproof. They're signing the richest TV deal ever, and it's amazing how Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, you name all these, major, U.S. sports leagues have all taken some struggles and would have stayed intact. The NFL, you look last year of the top 30 shows watched in America, 27 were NFL games. So tell me what kind of big hit they took. And now today it's harder to track than years ago because you can watch it off your cell phone or an iPad or a computer. It's much more difficult than off your TV. And a lot of people get together. They watch a game at someone's house. Mm-hmm. So you might have families that say, man, I ain't paying that kind of money for a ticket. But y'all come over, hey, we'll barbecue or we'll go get pizza or chicken or hamburgers or whatever, and we'll do it here at the house. So some of those ratings are skewed a little bit because there are multiple people watching. Go to a sports bar somewhere to watch a game. There ain't just one or two people in there. You know, especially if you're in Louisiana and the Saints are on or LSU's on, they got a ton of people in there, which maybe at one time they would have went to a game, but, you know, the cost of ticket and parking and everything else and the hassle of getting in and out, they don't want to deal with. They don't want to deal with it anymore. And so Jim Finks told me this back in 1988. We were waiting for a guy that I work with today who's got a habit of always being late. So we waiting for him to come do the TV show with us. And Jim tells me, you know, the worst thing that can happen to this league is it becomes a TV watching game and we don't have people in the stands. So that's the biggest concern I have. This is 1988. He told me this. It's the biggest concern I have for the NFL, that it's going to turn into a TV watching game and people aren't going to be able to afford to go to an NFL game. Aren't we at that brink today?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, we are.
We certainly are. And it's amazing how in that 33-year span that so much has changed, but that is still the big concern, and that we are at that brink right now. Though it's interesting. And
the embrace of gambling. That's the other part of it. Man, 10 years ago, a team in Las Vegas, that ain't happening. We don't want to get gambling involved. You know, I heard the commissioner say that fantasy football wasn't gambling. All I know is in a couple of leagues, if I got coin on the line every week, I call that gambling. You know, I don't know what he calls it, but I know what I call it.
Well, unless you're Edwin Edwards, then you call it gaming.
Yeah, well, you know, and Edwards understands the difference too. Man, listen, he does understand what gambling and gaming is. But here's my deal. I think the biggest growth in football from TV watching, a lot of it has to do with it's the easiest ever today to gamble. You know, now states passing laws that you can go gamble, you know, and casinos. I woke up on a New Year's Day 2 years ago. I walked down to place a bet because I stayed at a casino that night in Mississippi. And this was like at 6:50 in the morning. I counted them, 31 people ahead of me.
Wow.
They had one booth up because they weren't used to having that type volume that early in the morning. They had to open up another booth, but initially it was 31 people ahead of me. So gambling has become part of society. Now the NFL is embracing gambling, the official gambling site, you know, of the NFL. Fox Sports, didn't they buddy up with Bally's?
Yes, they did.
Didn't they have their arm around? They got their arm around Bally's today. I mean, so
yeah, they sold off to Bally's, the regional networks anyway.
And so, okay, you've embraced that now. And the second part too is fantasy football, where you have people now pulling for players and not necessarily teams. You know, well, they pulling for their team, but they're watching football, many of them, because either they got a player in that game or they got somebody they're up against and it's close, and they're watching to make sure that guy doesn't go off, you know, scoring-wise or yardage-wise. Man, I'm telling you, it's the new world. And I think finally the NFL has embraced it. They don't want to say it, but it's actuality of what's happened in this world. Those two things have changed the concept of what you watch. They've made the rules to make it where it's a much more offensive game that you keep watching. And they got everything rolling in that direction. You know, at one time it was the rotisserie league, so to speak, in baseball. But today it's all about fantasy football. And you wouldn't believe, and let me see how to put this best. I have people of a certain age, a little older in life, to connect with their grandsons. You have people in their 70s and 80s will call me and say, listen, could you give me some tips on fantasy football and who to pick? Because they want to have that connection with the grandson. who's in his teens or early 20, and okay, I'm on that league and you are too, so tell me something about how I should pick. And you want that connection because, they're not the little kid anymore. They're grown up. And so what matters to you probably sometimes doesn't matter to them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you in fantasy football with them, then it matters. It's a way to connect with another generation. And I think for me, that's a great part. When I had a 82-year-old woman just actually send me an email to ask me about fantasy football. I think that's wonderful. She's got a 16-year-old grandson that they're in the same league. And kudos to her because she knows this is a connect, the dots. It really is. Now, for some people, they just poo-poo that off. I think that young lady, so to speak, in life, she got a big heart to do it. Because I know she doesn't know anything about I can tell she don't know anything about fantasy
football. That
football.
sounds just like me.
And watch, she'll win the league. She'll beat her 16-year-old grandson.
Listen, I was there at one event, and we had a guy that, let's just say, he had a few barley pops in him. And the picks he did that day, I looked at him because he's right alongside of me. And I'm like, dude, you ain't winning nothing. You just throwing your money in the pot with this. Well, he makes a couple of late selections, which were rookie players. And because normally you don't have a rookie get picked high in fantasy football. And he made a couple picks, and I thought was interesting and everything else. He ended up finishing second.
Wow.
And I'm like, man, if I'm that inebriated from here, I should be doing this like what you do, because I ended up third, and so I was embarrassed. He beat me, and his antenna wasn't quite catching all the channels that day.
and you're the expert. Wow, then maybe a few soda.
I had a lead. I had a lead in there into week 14. And then it fell apart for me the last couple of weeks. And he caught a fire. He had a couple of rookie guys that got him over the edge, and a kicker that was really good.
Damn,
that was the one good pick he made. Man, he hit a kicker, and he had a couple of rookie guys that just got the best of me. And so, listen, it's a little bit of skill, and as I told him, a lot of luck.
Yes, indeed. Mike Detiller joining us on Acadiana's Morning News. Bernie, you got anything before we get out of here?
No, just thank you so much, Mike, for joining us. It's been a great conversation.
And we hope to do it again during football season.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Hey, we appreciate you. And again, let's do it during September and throughout football season once the now 17-week season gets here.
And eventually 18. We all going to live long enough to see that. That's coming real quickly.
Yeah.
Because of the money, and the NFL season will, for me, I think will end in late February. Very soon. I think you're seeing this pushback, and the reasoning why, if you're in the Northeast or Midwest, and there are weather situations, the travel is less, and you stay home, and guess what you do more? You watch TV.
Yeah, you're right. And not only
that. The NFL ain't stupid. And they smart with it. They understand the one thing they learned in the pandemic was that people turn to television.
Yep, and during the winter months, they have a captive audience. So that 18-week season and possibly an expanded playoff, it'll be here within the next, I think, 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think you'll see 18 games in the very near future. We seeing it 17. It won't be long before TV says, okay, we'll kick the cash in. Let's make it an extra week. And let's push this into late February. For the NFL, okay, it pushes it into late February. Then you're going to have a little downtime and then free agency. And it may push the draft back a little bit. It may be into May. But, okay, so now you've got your run now, where from mid-May into mid-July, not a lot going on. But from July all the way into mid-May, NFL football. In some fashion, either the coverage of the off-season or the coverage of games.
Yeah. And right now, the coverage of the offseason's already there. Add that extra month of regular season and/or playoffs. Everybody will eat it up, even the people who claim they're not watching the NFL. Mike, we appreciate it, brother. Thank you for taking the time. We'll talk to you in September.
All righty. God bless. Thank y'all both.
Thank you.